Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The house was wrapped in the kind of quiet that only comes past midnight, when the city outside softens, and every sound feels louder than it should. The clock ticked from the hallway. The faint hum of the heater whispered through the living room. And there he was, sitting across from me on the couch, his fingers resting on the rim of a half-finished glass of water. My husband had drifted off hours ago, his steady breathing now a gentle rhythm in the next room. But here, in this low amber light, it felt like the air belonged only to us. I noticed how his shirt clung faintly to his shoulders, how the crease at the corner of his eyes deepened when he smiled, like he was trying not to. We weren't saying much. Just fragments. Little pauses where words might have been. But those pauses carried weight, like the unspoken had a heartbeat of its own. His knee brushed mine, barely, and neither of us moved away. My fingers tightened around the edge of my cup, as if anchoring myself to something, anything, while his gaze lingered a second too long. There's a line people talk about, the one between what you mean to do and what you never planned for. I felt that line right there, tracing along my skin as his hand reached, not touching, just hovering, like he was asking permission without a word. My breath caught. The house didn't stir. My husband didn't turn. And for a moment, it was just a quiet room and the hum between us that felt dangerously alive. I shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, and that was enough to close the space. His fingertips grazed what should have been off limits, slow, deliberate, a question in the dark neither of us had answered yet. I knew if we stayed here any longer, we'd step past a point where the night couldn't take it back. His fingers didn't move right away, they just stayed there, warm against my skin, as though the room itself had tilted and we were both waiting to see where gravity would pull us. I should have leaned back. I should have broken the silence with something light, something safe. Instead, my breath came a little slower, a little deeper. When I finally looked at him, his eyes weren't on my eyes at all, they flicked lower, tracing the curve of my jaw, lingering at the corner of my mouth before darting back up like he'd been caught. My lips tingled from the attention that hadn't even touched them. The air between us felt thinner now. His thumb brushed the side of my hand, rough against smooth, a tiny movement that said far more than either of us had been brave enough to speak. My heart thudded once, hard. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured, the sound low, almost teasing, like he wanted to see if I'd flinch. "I'm trying not to be heard," I whispered back, eyes flicking toward the door behind which my husband slept. The words hung there, half a warning, half an invitation. He chuckled softly, that kind of laugh that carries heat in its edges, and leaned in, not enough to close the distance, just enough for his breath to find the hollow beneath my ear. I didn't move. Maybe I couldn't. A flicker of something, jealousy, defiance, maybe both, flashed in his expression when I finally pulled back half an inch, as though testing how far he'd follow. His hand stayed exactly where it was, though. Firm. Unshaken. Then it happened, the couch shifted beneath us, a cushion sinking, a pillow sliding. I lost my balance, catching myself against his chest. His hand found my waist, steadying me. It was supposed to be nothing, but the heat of it spread like a secret being passed skin to skin. For a second, neither of us breathed. The house was still silent. The door still closed. But now there was no space left between us. The warmth of his hand lingered on my waist longer than it should have, like an echo that refused to fade. I straightened, meaning to create distance, but his arm stayed just close enough that our shoulders brushed again, a feather-light contact that sent a ripple through the quiet room. Every small movement became amplified. The shift of his fingers as they rested on his knee. The slow turn of his head when I spoke. Even the way his breath caught before a sentence made the air feel alive, charged. "You're going to wake him," I whispered, though my own voice betrayed me, soft, low, almost trembling. His lips tilted in the faintest hint of a smile. "Am I?" Or are you? The challenge hung there. My heart kicked once against my ribs. He didn't move closer, not yet. Instead, he leaned back just slightly, letting his knee press against mine, then pulling away like a tide teasing the shore. It was maddening, the way he gave space only to take it back in the next breath. I reached for my glass, more to have something to do than out of thirst, and felt the brush of his fingertips along the back of my hand as he passed it to me. Deliberate. Slow. Testing. Still so careful, he murmured, his voice close to my ear now. I felt the warmth of it skim my skin, and my pulse stumbled. The clock in the hall ticked louder than ever. Behind that door, the world I was supposed to belong to slept soundly, but here, in this narrow band of lamplight, another gravity was pulling at me. I shifted to stand, to break the spell, but he rose too, close enough that I felt the heat of his chest a breath away. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he reached up, slowly, and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered there, tracing the edge of my jaw with the lightest drag. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. And before I could even find the words, his hands slid behind my back, not pulling, not yet, but ready. His fingers still rested lightly against my back, a barely there touch that felt louder than any sound in the room. Neither of us moved at first. It was the kind of stillness that thrummed with possibility, every second a fragile thread ready to snap. I could feel his breath now, warm, steady, brushing the space just beneath my cheek. It carried the faintest trace of his drink, the kind of detail you only notice when someone is too close. "You shouldn't be here," I murmured, but it came out softer than intended, more confession than warning. He tilted his head slightly, enough that his lips hovered a heartbeat from my temple. "And yet you haven't moved," he whispered back. The truth of that settled in my chest like a weight. My hand, almost on its own, lifted slightly, fingers grazing the fabric of his sleeve. Not a hold, just a test, a question written in touch. His answering breath deepened. I felt his thumb trace an absent circle against my waist, slow and deliberate, the kind of gesture that says nothing and everything at once. "Does he ever notice?" he asked suddenly, voice barely above the hum of the heater. The word struck sharper than the touch. My heart stuttered, torn between indignation and the rush of heat that question carried. I turned to look at him fully, and for a moment, our noses nearly brushed. The clock ticked again. Somewhere in the house, the night shifted, but neither of us broke. Playfulness flickered in his eyes then, a dangerous kind, the kind that pulls you forward while warning you to run. "You're shaking," he murmured. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out like a tremor. "Maybe it's the cold," I said, though the heat between us told another story. He leaned in a fraction more, his lips so close I could feel the whisper of them before they ever touched. My hand hovered near his chest now, ready to push, or to pull, I hadn't decided. And just as the space between us finally felt too thin to survive, a sudden sound, the creak of a door down the hall. We froze. The creak of the door down the hall made both of us turn, but it didn't open further. Just the house shifting, or so it seemed. The tension didn't vanish, it only curled tighter, like a held breath that refused to be released. I stepped back first, a half step meant to steady the pounding in my chest. "We should stop," I whispered, not because I wanted to, but because the night was starting to feel too fragile. He didn't argue. He only poured himself another inch of water, the glass catching the amber light as if mocking my restraint. "You're shaking," he said again, this time not as a tease but as an observation. "Maybe I need something to calm down," I replied, reaching for the glass in his hand before he could stop me. Our fingers brushed, warm against warm, and neither of us let go at first. His thumb rested over mine just long enough for it to feel intentional. "Careful," he murmured, "you might start drinking from my glass." There was that playful tilt again, the one that felt like both a dare and an invitation. I took a sip anyway, holding his gaze over the rim. Something shifted then, not loud, not obvious, but enough to bring him closer. He leaned against the couch, one arm resting behind me, the other brushing my elbow as I handed the glass back. His presence wrapped around me like a shadow that chose to stay. "You always sit so far from him," he said quietly, eyes flicking toward the closed door. "Funny how close you'll stand to me." Jealousy slid under my skin, not for what I had, but for what I might lose if this moment ever surfaced. I laughed, but it came out thinner than I intended. "Maybe because you keep finding ways to be here," I said. He smirked, that slow, knowing smirk that always came before something reckless. "Maybe you like that." Before I could answer, the cushion beneath me gave way again, and this time it wasn't a brush, it was a full, ungraceful slip. My hand shot out to catch myself, but so did his, and suddenly I was pressed against him, palms against his chest, his arm wrapped firm around my back. The world shrank to that one point of contact. His heartbeat was quick now, or maybe it was mine. Our faces hovered inches apart. I could see every line near his eyes, the faint stubble at his jaw, the way his lips curved, waiting, patient, hungry. "Still shaking," he whispered, his breath touching mine. It felt inevitable. The night, the warmth, the pull, all of it drawing a single line toward a choice neither of us were supposed to make. And then, a sudden vibration on the table. My phone lit up. His eyes flicked to it, and in that flicker, the spell cracked. The phone buzzed again, its glow painting the room in a faint, restless light. My breath caught as I glanced at it, my husband's name on the screen, a silent call from the next room. My hand twitched, halfway to reaching, but his grip around my waist tightened just slightly, steady but unyielding. "Answer it," he murmured, voice low against my skin, "if that's what you want." I didn't move. For a moment, the entire house seemed to hold its breath with me. His thumb pressed gently against my side, not pulling me closer, not pushing me away, just there, warm and unspoken. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered, my forehead brushing his by accident. Or maybe not by accident at all. The air between us thinned, humming with every word left unsaid. "You already are," he said, and this time his hand shifted, not wandering, just resting firmly at my waist, the weight of it grounding me in a way that felt dangerously right. For the first time that night, neither of us looked toward the door. The pull had stopped being a secret, it had become a choice waiting to be made. His breath hitched as I lifted my gaze, our foreheads touching now, a whisper of warmth passing between us. "What happens if this doesn't stop?" I asked, more to the air than to him. His answer came not in words, but in a slow, quiet exhale against my lips, so close, so steady, that it felt like a promise and a warning all at once. And then, the phone buzzed again. But this time, the message preview flashed on the screen, "He's not where you think." The words jolted me. I turned to grab the phone, but his hand still rested at my waist, his presence still steady, still close. "What does that mean?" I breathed, half to him, half to myself. He didn't answer. His eyes, dark and unreadable, held mine with a quiet that said everything and nothing. And in that suspended breath between us, the room no longer felt like the only secret being kept tonight. The message glowed on the screen like a crack in the night, "He's not where you think." I picked it up with trembling fingers, the weight of those words pressing harder than his hand still resting at my waist. My breath came uneven, torn between the heat of the moment and the sudden chill of doubt. "I should go," I whispered. It sounded like a retreat, but it felt like anything but. He eased his hand away, slow enough that the warmth lingered, leaving a ghost of contact that burned more than the touch itself. "You always could," he murmured, not accusing, not pleading, just stating a truth that somehow made it harder to move. I turned toward the hallway, where the door still stood closed, silent as if it had never stirred. My heart thudded in my ears, echoing the clock's relentless tick, the same sound that had framed our first brush, our first pause, our first almost. Then I felt it, the brush of his fingers at my elbow, light as a whisper. Not to stop me, just to remind me. A soft gesture that carried every moment we hadn't let happen. I looked back, and he smiled, not the reckless smirk from before, but a quieter one, the kind that folds secrets behind it. A smile that didn't beg for a promise, but made one anyway. Get some rest, he said softly. I managed a breath of a laugh, shaking my head. Right. Like that'll happen. And then, without warning, he stepped forward and wrapped me in a brief, lingering hug, the kind that didn't demand anything more, but left everything unsaid humming in the space between our hearts. When I finally stepped away, the night felt different, heavier with what almost was, lighter with what hadn't yet happened. The clock kept ticking. The door stayed shut. And somewhere in the quiet, I wondered if the message on my phone was a warning, or an invitation.